Some people say that divorce is worse than death. Losing a spouse is painful beyond words, right? Losing the love of your life as he or she continues to be involved in your life, that keeps a wounded heart bleeding. Today, we're going to hear an honest and raw conversation with Heather and Stephen Magnotti. They've experienced the pain of divorce, and they're going to tell you about the healing process. And now they're going to tell you how they help others in that process as well. Here's my conversation with Heather and Stephen. Well, Stephen, Heather, thanks so much for joining us today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
You've been looking forward to it. We've talked about this for a while, right? Mm-hmm. And just so been looking forward to the time. So we're going to talk about some divorce and the challenges of that, and how we can go through a good process to really recover and be healthy. And then we're going to talk about blended families as well. And I'm very excited to talk about that because I was just got finished before we started talking to a young man who's contemplating a blended family thing and has a lot of concern about it. As you guys did, and you can talk about how you work through it. So, guys, at the Bible Chapel and the preaching that we've done, Here the Journey, we talk about marriage and the importance of that, and one man, one woman for life, and we believe that. And when I teach on it, I always think, oh my goodness, there are people there who they never wanted a marriage to break up. They did everything, and yet this is like rubbing salt in their wounds. And so as we talk about this, we want to, as you guys lead the way in this, obviously sensitive to those who have gone through an extremely difficult time, and you guys have lived it. Mm-hmm. You've lived it. So someone has said that divorce is worse than death in the sense that there's always that reminder the person, if it's a blended family, working through all those things. Just, if you would, talk about some of the emotions and feelings that you guys went through as a marriage ended and you tried to pick up the pieces and move on.
I know for me, there was so much shock in the beginning. So, when you look at the comparison, I never like to compare it because that's something that part of this journey has been able to allow me to empathize with people that have a lot of different scenarios that has led to their divorce. So I always just want to make sure I never want to say my pain was worse than anyone else's pain. Yet when I look at the loss of a marriage, when it comes to the shock up front, the denial, like there's a lot, being a nurse myself and knowing those stages of grief, if you will, they hit you from every direction. Mm-hmm. We talk about in divorce care, and what really applied to me is I felt like you were getting hit by a tidal wave from every direction, and you couldn't even get yourself to stand up to see which direction that you were supposed to go next. And so those emotions from shock, denial, anger, desperation, deep sadness, not being able to sleep. I mean, in the very beginning, it just hits you like that tidal wave. And can you come up for air? And having some people around you is so important. And that can be present for some people and not for others, depending on their situations. Mm-hmm. So I think the mixture of all those emotions, and I know we were talking about this a little bit, the loss of the person that is still there that you mentioned, but your love story is over. You're mourning the loss of your future that you thought you would have. So there's a lot of different losses that when that person does still exist, that you are reminded constantly of those losses. Mm-hmm. So it is something that's real important for anyone right away to recognize that those are normal and not be too hard on yourself, that it does hit you hard. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, she hit it right on the nail on the head. It's the whole wide spectrum of emotions you go through. The sadness and regret, and remorse, and denial. This isn't going to happen to me. My marriage, I'm not going to be one of those statistics. My marriage isn't going to end. I've got I've got everything. Everything's perfect in my life, and the disappointment that your dreams and what you had laid out for your future is over. That hits you right, hard and knocks you down. The other thing that I dealt with personally is just, the sadness that I had to put my kids through it. Mm-hmm. That was hard. Mm-hmm. Because this is a decision that my ex and myself made, but they're rolling through it right with us, mm-hmm. and that's not fair mm-hmm. to them. Mm-hmm. So to have them go through that tore me up. That was that's something that I frankly still deal with mm-hmm. to this day. That had to drag them through that process. So that sadness for them was something else that I dealt with. Mm-hmm. So
yeah, same.
Heather, you mentioned the grief process, mm-hmm. and again, being a nurse, you know that well. Is it very similar? Do you go through kind of the stages of grief like that? It's kind of a death of a dream or a death of a future or death of a relationship, really. Yeah,
I mean, all of that. Mm-hmm. And the one thing that I think is important, and it actually applies, is you don't all of a sudden arrive at that acceptance and like everything's fine. Mm-hmm. You need to prepare yourself for different triggers that can sometimes take you back through all those steps again. And like Stephen mentioned, seeing your kids go through the pain can be a big trigger also, because like whether it makes you angry, whether it makes you sad, when you're walking beside them, just a lot of times they feel like they're the only ones also that are going through it, and you feel like you're the only one going through it. And so therefore, sometimes you don't know how to even equip your kids to go through those stages too. So I would say it is very similar, and especially since there's going to be known triggers along the way. And I think preparing for holidays, just little milestones that your kid hits that you had always maybe had in your mind that you would be celebrating it as
senior recognition, graduations,
right?
All that, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, weddings even, that we've gone to that point already. But from when they're little to when you're doing the games and you're going to cheer them on, and just little different things that you just trigger that memory. Mm-hmm. And like you mentioned earlier, you're managing that with the other parent, with your ex. Mm-hmm. And so you're needing to actually learn a lot of different coping tools that are brand new that you're having to develop. Just simply being cordial, being hello, not holding grudges. And we'll get to that a little bit later on how important it is to kind of walk through different tools and steps to help equip you for those steps. So you're hurting. There's got to be times of anger and sadness and just all the emotions coming together. And yet this person is still your kid's mother or father. And so it's got to be so hard not to show all your emotions in front of them. And then that's hard because you have to stuff it because there are things you want to say and it's not going to be healthy to say. So how do you work through all that?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the things we say in divorce care a lot is you don't want to say anything derogatory about your ex in front of your kids. You just can't do it. As much as you want to, it's important to bite your tongue. I mean, they're their mom, they're their dad. They don't want to hear anything spoken, ill about them. So that for sure you have to. But I mean, you got to put that all aside. If you've got kids, you have to. And this is one of the things we talk about in divorce care. This I can't remember. There's a little map in the divorce care book, and it talks about the different paths you can take. And one of the things is you have to immediately, separation, divorce, whatever it is, you've got kids to raise. You've got to come together for those kids' sake to make the decisions to raise them right. And you've got to put it aside, which can be hard, but you've got to overcome that for the kids' sake.
Talk about the importance, as you guys experienced, the Lord really ministering to you, and then the community of believers ministering to you. Now, people can say some crazy things, right? when we get ready for a viewing of someone who has died, I always say, okay, some people are going to say some things you're going to think, why would they even say that? You know, they just don't know what to say, and so they say things. So you're always going to get things that probably can hurt, you know, people say. But talk about, we're going to get to the divorce care ministry here in a second, which I think is so important, but just the strength you received from the Lord as you work through that, taking your questions and your emotions to Him, and the community of believers that kind of rallied around. If that was your experience.
Yeah. For me,
two separate experiences here. I'll let her go first.
Okay.
Yeah. For me, I was very close and tied into my church that we attended at the time in Virginia, and in ladies' Bible study, and knew our ladies' ministry director there. And when there was just some early on signs of the relationship ending, or there being problems that were very big red flags, two things. One, it drove me to my knees in a way that I never imagined, personally, with my own faith journey. I mean, truly crying out to God, saying, like, what in the world? Like, for me, having our marriage being, my first marriage being, biblically grounded, and being in the church a lot, I did wrestle a lot with, like, why God, and, like, this word wasn't even in my vocabulary, if you will. Like, it never was what some people will call, like, an open window or an open door. Like, it wasn't kind of in an option, if you will. So there was a lot of wrestling with God on that being the direction. Thankfully, the ladies' ministry director there said, let's meet weekly. And she met with me and just helped me stay grounded in God's word. And I really was reading Psalm 139 at the time. And I even found it on song, and I would listen to it on replay. And Psalm 139 references how you're fearfully and wonderfully made, and how He hems you in before and behind, and you're never away from His presence, whether you're in the heights or the depths. And there's a particular verse that was really hard for me during that time, and it was the one that refers to, and all of your days were ordained for you before one of them came to be. And I'd be like, this, and I would wrestle with God in my prayers and saying, like, I need to take your word as true, and, like, if this is ordained for me, I want to make sure if there's anything I hold on to is my faith and trust in God. So I'm just really grateful that I did have, like, a community of believers. My friends back here in Pittsburgh actually stayed really close with me too, and even came down to visit with me.
She was in Virginia at the time. I don't know if you said that or not.
This I did, Virginia, yeah. And my family from back here in Pittsburgh, and came and helped me through some times. I even had a sister-in-law come and say, here's a new budget that you can work with, because there's just so much that you have to go through at the time. And that encouragement from those that just held me up, I don't know. Like, I looked at it as the hand of God providing for me through the community of believers. Like you referenced, that other person, unfortunately, it was, unfortunately, I also moved out of state, and it was very difficult managing through that time too, to see the pain of my kids with a lot of change. So then the church family here, is able to kind of connect back into that to help just me manage through those first months and the first years, being a single mom. Yeah.
And you talked about how you'd find provisions where you least expected it.
Yeah, it was very, like, I would, like, hit a pit, and then it's like God sent someone that, like, reached into the pit, and whether it was, like, an anonymous, little donation or a gift card or just a phone call, and it was very noticeable. Like, it was like God kept telling me, I am here, I am here. There's a song by Jeremy Camp that was popular back then, this, what am I talking, 13 years ago. It was called Enough. And it was just simply that he is enough. And it was a song that really spoke to me during that time.
So I think it's cool that, someone in your church said, let me walk through this with you, and met with you regularly and surrounded by people. Again, you're going through it on your own, but you have people to lean on. Stephen, your story was a little different.
Oh, yeah. So I was not a believer at the time. I really was on my own in regards to that. It was rough. I wasn't attending church. I had some support from some, but not a lot. So yeah, and I didn't go to divorce care. And we're going to talk about divorce care in a second, but I didn't go to divorce. Didn't even know about it. So yeah, it was rough. Loneliness is definitely. I had my kids. We split custody, so my kids were with me, half the time. But it was very lonely. The amazing thing, though, is at that time is when I started feeling that there's something else I'm missing. And I just felt this draw. It was a slow process, but I began to feel this draw to the Lord, and I started coming here to church, and it was over a number of years. It took for him to make some progress with me, but he did. And the amazing thing to me is, and I've got a men's Bible study I meet, and I've told these guys this. I really don't think I would have ever given my life to Christ if I didn't go through the divorce. I mean, I had it all under control. I had the wife and the kids and the nice big house and an awesome job, successful job, and the nice car. I didn't need him. I had it. And he knocked me down, put me on my knees, as she said, and I knew, and I just felt there was something else. And I truly think that he works at his own speed and his own way, and that's what it took for me to come to him. So it was quite a different story than hers. Yeah.
So let's talk about, you guys both have unique experiences. Heather, did you go through divorce care? And we're going to talk about a lot of the things that divorce care provides. But let's talk about your different experience, because you didn't, Stephen, and you did. So let's just compare and contrast that a little bit. Start with you, Heather. So you come back kind of reeling with everything going on. And you came back and you came back to a community that you had left with we all thought healthy marriage, and right, and now it's not. The marriage is over. Talk about going through divorce care and how that ministered to you.
The really neat thing is that women's ministry director in Virginia actually said there's divorce care locally that another church leads, and she actually sent me, and I started a couple lessons actually in Virginia. Then when I moved here, I knew that the Bible Chapel also had divorce care, and so it was kind of like an easy transition. I had done a couple lessons there, and Marlene, bless her heart, and for that ministry, she was the leader at the time, and she welcomed me right in, and she led with such grace and a safe place, and that's the part that really spoke to me, is it was a safe place, and I learned through some of that, the lessons that you go through, that I'm not alone. There's hope, there's tools, there's some things I need to process still. And I think if anything, it helped me identify areas that maybe I didn't address, some things that I need to work on. And I think that's what really spoke to me most through it, is sure, you can sit and blame all day, or complain and be sad. And yes, there's a time for that. But what I really liked about it is it helped equip me to say, like, okay, that's all true maybe, or not true, or working through it. But what about you? Like, what about, your future and your ability to forgive, your ability to manage your finances on your own, to, be a single parent, and, kind of challenging that song I mentioned, God is enough. Like, is he still? Like, how do I continue that faith journey? And divorce care, to me, helped equip me for some of those next steps. We always encourage people, even after divorce care, to go join a ladies' Bible study or do something else. And I think continuing on that was also helpful for me, that I knew those resources were here, at the Bible Chapel too. And I even got back into youth ministry for a while, which was really passionate to my heart. So stepping out and serving, which, is part of that recovery too, like that you can still be used of God because you have that significance that sometimes you feel is really lost through going through divorce.
So getting in divorce care fairly early on was so important in your healing process. Stephen, you didn't.
Nope.
And talk about your process.
You know what? It's as I look back now, and mine's, we both went through it kind of roughly the same time, about 14, 15 years ago for me. It's a blur. I mean, I didn't have, I did get some counseling. I went to a counselor, not a Christian counselor, but I did get some counseling, not for very long, but I did. And it, I just threw myself into my kids. They were at the time like 8, 9. The youngest was around 8 or 9, and then I had 2 other ones in their early teens. They were busy with activities, soccer and cheerleading and football and baseball and lacrosse, and I just ran with them. They're like if I didn't have them, they probably had an activity that I was going to. I was my job, of course. If I wasn't home, I was working. So I just threw myself into that. And I did keep busy, but again, I didn't. I'm a guy. I don't need help. I didn't reach out to, come on, I don't need divorce care.
I went to counselor twice.
Yeah, exactly. So to me, I definitely, that being said, I think if I knew of divorce care at the time, I would have went. I don't think I was that stubborn. But it's a blur, frankly, that how, there was meetings with attorneys, just going through all that stuff. So it's and again, that's where my spiritual journey started too. I started coming here and kept running into somebody in the hallway a lot. And so, but yeah, so yeah, it's I don't remember a lot from that time.
So you weren't a believer,
right?
You now realize I didn't have this life under the control I thought I did.
You bet.
I need something or someone. When did you try? At what point in there did you say, "Okay, it's Jesus, and I trust in Him"?
Yeah, it was. I don't have that magic date that a lot of people do. I know some people do, some people don't. But it was, probably around 2014-ish is when I did. I started going to, Tunch's locker room, and that was awesome. But it was probably around then, because we kind of started dating a little bit in 2015. But yeah, so it was right around 2014 or so.
Okay. Is there a time when a person should start divorce care? Or I know in grief, sometimes after an individual loses a loved one, it's sometimes they're not even ready to start grief share next week, right? So is there a time, do you need to be at a spot to where you say, okay, now I'm ready to do that?
I would say no, however,
Okay.
Because, you can come and join the divorce care support group and lessons, whether you're 2 weeks post-separated, whether you're 2 years post-divorce, whether you're 10 years out and you feel like you never really recovered and you heard about divorce care and you feel like you need to regroup and maybe kind of go back. But to the earlier point of it being kind of fresh, a couple things. Our co-leader with us, Val, I just definitely want to give her a shout out because she does a phenomenal job of what may more formally be called like intake. So like she is able to talk with people who are interested to kind of feel where they're at, so that she can have a personal conversation with them and see like if this is the right time for them, if they're open to walking down the road of healing. If someone's in the midst of like, maybe they're still trying to work through reconciliation and there needs to be that window staying open, we may say, hey, like, definitely pursue that and then call us for next semester, because we definitely want someone that maybe feels like they're definitely have made the turn from like hope and reconciliation and maybe counseling to I now am walking down the road of like separation that may be leaning towards divorce. So we want to make sure we're not marriage counseling, because like we're not counselors and we're not there for that. So we're not there for couples, we're there for an individual. And so I think it helps. The online is really helpful where it has like frequently asked questions. So people can go and kind of see like, do I relate with that? Where maybe I will make the phone call to go. So I would say anytime. Yeah. However, it depends kind of like on each unique situation.
Okay. And we've got the wide spectrum of people, young, old, freshly, like she just said, 2 weeks out, maybe separated, to 10 years ago, I was divorced, and the people that just haven't are still dealing with it, still recovering. So it's remarkable the range of people. It's you kind of come when you're ready and you think you need the help.
So talk to the person out there. Heather, you take a person, the scenario, and Stephen, you take another scenario, right? So start with you, Heather. So a person is saying, man, I'm hurting and I don't want to go. Open up, be vulnerable, hear other stories that are just going to make me feel worse. I just don't think I can do that.
Well, I think for that person, that is why like Val does offer that initial phone call to talk through that. So like again, we're not counselors, and I know Val would be like, remind them we're not counselors. But we would be able to talk through that a little bit and kind of see like, all right, well, maybe just come. We also have part of our like group share policy, if you will, that you can pass. So you don't have to even say your name. You don't have to answer a question for the first few weeks. In fact,
until you're comfortable.
Val herself shares her experience when she attended divorce care. Like she felt like every time she even would open her mouth, she was going to just start crying. So we have our tissue boxes and we pass them around, and we really encourage each other to share empathy with each other when you sense someone is starting to feel that way, that we give them the pass. And so that's what shared in divorce care stays in divorce care, in the safe place. So to that person, I would reassure them that that's like how we handle it, is a very safe and confidential place. And if they would like to check it out to only hear at first, or there are some resources online, like if they'd rather, they can sign up for like a daily email that they can get from divorce care. So maybe they want to start with a, not in-person approach with some of the resources online is an option too.
So Stephen, talk to the guy like you who said, I got it. This hurts. Yeah. This is tough, but I'm a man and I don't want to go in there. And I just heard you might start crying, and I know I don't want that. Yeah. And talk to that person. Tell them why they need, again, based on their timing, but why they need to do this. Why?
Well, yeah, I think what I say to the class a lot. I know Heather's heard me say it a bunch, and Val as well. When you go through divorce, you feel like you're the only one in the world going through it. You feel like you're on an island, and we know the stats. We know the statistics. That's not true.
And if you go to church, everybody else has a perfect marriage.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Or their Facebook profiles all look great, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Pictures of their lovely families, yeah. So it's, you're not. And so that time you come to divorce care is you're with others going through it. and there is, security in numbers sometimes. And and the amazing thing that we've talked about is the progress that you make from that first, it's I think a 12 or 13 week program, from that first class to 12 or 13 weeks later, or even 8, 10, 12 weeks later, when they come in, like Heather said, maybe not even talking the first week. They're, I'm sorry you have to pass. I can't talk today. And, tissues. And by 8 weeks, 10 weeks, 12 weeks in, they've got a smile on their face with other people. They've made friends. They're sharing, they're talking. Is their life perfect? Far from it. Are they healed? Heck no. But the progress that they've made is truly remarkable. We wrap up, and Val and Heather and I maybe take 15, 20 minutes to get the equipment put away and clean up and everything. And we'll walk out in the parking lot 20 minutes later, and they're out there talking with each other. And they're, like I said, maybe they're commiserating, maybe they're laughing, who knows? But they've made friends to help them along in that journey. And so if I could say anything to those guys out there is, you're not going through it alone. And you can come and you can share if you want, or not share, but just to hear the perspective of other people going through it does help you heal. I mean, there is healing, there's hope, and that's that when you're that low, that's enough.
I think a reminder people need too is it's not just about me, right? So it is about my kids, and I got to get health. I got to get at least on the road to health. Because other people are depending on me and looking to me and kind of watching what I do. So not just the benefits that, the risks I may have to take on my own to go and do it, but I have to get healthy for my kids as well.
Yeah, and it's funny. There's one of the first, I'm going to say here, one of the first classes is the classic, one of the counselors in the video talks about how offended he was the first time he heard the security announcement on an airplane. How when the oxygen mask falls, put yours on first and then put your kids on. And he was offended. What kind of father am I that would put my mask on first before my kids? And then he looks at the camera and says, "Smart father, because if I'm not taking care of myself, then I can't take care of my kids."
Right.
And that's just good. Yeah, that's always a good one.
So I joined a group. What are some of the things I'm going to be taught, to be encouraged? What are some of the things I'm going to learn as I go through this? But how long does a group last?
It's like 13 weeks.
13 weeks.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, this is a Christian-based program. So we are opening in prayer. We are closing in prayer. We are asking them. We give prayer cards out every class to write a prayer down as it comes to you during the class. Val has a database of past participants, like Heather was, that she sends prayer requests out, and they're prayer warriors, and they want to pray for these people as they're walking through this difficult time in their lives. So that's first and foremost. But as far as some of the topics that you deal with, it's going to be a lot of the ones you think about. It's how to deal with conflict in your life, anger, stress, anxiety. There's topics on depression. You talked about loneliness. There's a whole session on loneliness, financial issues, legal issues. There's one of the best classes that somebody's going to have to deal with eventually that's going through it is forgiveness. You're going to have to hit that at some point for your own benefit, is forgiveness. And so there's a class on that frankly most people aren't ready for that are going through it, but they've got to hear it, and eventually they'll tackle it. There's a great class around the holidays. It's called Surviving the Holidays. Holidays are tough for people going through this. It is hard, and I think it's a great class that we encourage people to come. It's kind of an add-on to the session to deal with the holidays. And then there's the class that kind of wraps it up. That's called I think it's called Next Steps, or What's Next, or something like that. And one of the key things in that is one of the next steps can be reconciliation. As Heather said before, we always are encouraging, if you can, where it's appropriate and where it's safe, because the sad thing is sometimes it's not. We always will encourage reconciliation for these people that are going through divorce, separation. The sad thing is, it's for many it's not. And so what are the next steps? So that's kind of
Well, and what's nice is we are able to walk and talk. Like, listen to their questions. A lot of people have preconceived notions of what it even means to forgive someone. So we're able to walk through those, like, I would say, like, lies of like, oh, that means I'm telling that person it's okay. Or so we're able to walk and answer their questions and kind of go through, what does it even mean? You know, what if no one ever says they're sorry? What if you're the one that, is responsible? What if you're both responsible? Like, how do you deal with self-forgiveness? There's a lot of topics that really allow you to be even interactive. The take-home homework, if you will, or lessons, we always encourage them. You're going to get out of it what you put into it. So obviously we're not checking anyone at the door if they did their homework, but we really see additional progress when they take those lessons home and they'll read and answer and respond to some of those homework lessons that we have. Because the structure, to your point, is nice to know what's expected. And we share that very early up front so they know there's structure. It's not like, when you see things on TV where you walk into a room that's a support group, sometimes people think that's like you just sit around and like all you do is sit back and listen. And I think that added for me when I did it. I loved that there was structure to it where you have like a certain number of minutes you'll cover like the homework question and answer. You'll watch a video. You'll do some follow-up discussion questions and then kind of wrap up and prepare for the next week. So I think knowing what's to be expected, and especially for parents that maybe are dealing with childcare, they know we're going to start on time and end on time, which I know sounds silly, but that's really important to people that we let them, get out the door to their kids.
Talk a little bit about forgiveness and working through that and how you deal with it in the class.
Yeah, that's probably the one class that we get I don't want to say pushback, but the people just most aren't ready, because most that are coming, the separation's fairly fresh and they're hurt and they're bitter and they're angry right now. But it's something we put it out there and we kind of tell everybody, maybe you're not there yet, but what do they say? The first step, be willing
I love that
what
part
is it?
Of the video.
Be willing to
pray for willingness to forgive. And I love that they address that, because when we do have a chance to go around the room, it allows a safe place for people to share. That's where I'm at. We'll be able to say, like, where do you feel you're at in that like readiness for forgiveness.
More often than it's not, I'm not there yet.
Yeah, I'm not there yet, or
and that's okay.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
But we're able to kind of share the benefits, and we're able to share some of the scripture that God calls us to forgive. Mm-hmm. And so, sometimes walking through obedience for those in the class that do maybe share that they are believers and they want to walk in obedience and healing, we're able to gently, kind of guide them to, like, here's the scripture. Maybe it's something you just spend the next couple weeks praying about, reading the fact that you're forgiven and what that looks like. And so part of the lesson, and even what I needed to learn through, my journey, because even before, us leading divorce care, I led youth, and I remember talking about the concept of forgiveness with even teenagers. And I'll never, what you said, forgiveness is not forgetting. Forgiveness is remembering that you forgave or would like to forgive. And so it's the remembering part. And in the video, they use the analogy of a library book that sometimes you need to check it out again, like check out the book of forgiveness so that you can kind of apply, your knowledge of what it means to forgive. Yeah. Because maybe you forgave, like, this little issue or this back here, but something else happens, like you said, and you've kind of got to walk through, what does that mean again? And how can I walk through forgiveness? Because when you start the bitterness route, and we see it, when you start harboring, those feelings and holding it against that person, especially when there's kids involved, like, even though you try your hardest to not talk down about the other spouse, like, it just comes out of you, bitterness. And so I know that for me, like I would put Bible verses on my mirror to remind myself and be able to look myself in the mirror. And a big question I would say is like 20 years from now, I want to be able to look myself in the mirror and like say that I really, and to the best of my ability at the time, you know, tried to make the decision with that in mind.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, there's a part in the video where the one guy says, you know, if God can forgive me in the mess I've made in my life, who am I to not extend forgiveness?
Right.
And that always hits me, you know, pretty good. That you know, and he's right on. You know, Jesus, what he did for me, and I'm forgiven for my sins. How can I not? I mean, what has this person done to me that it's so much that I can't forgive?
Are there things in divorce care that help you help your children?
Yeah, there's a point, there's a part in the back of every chapter that talks about, you know, how this particular topic applies to your kids. Now, we don't get too deep in with kids in the session because some people have kids, some people don't, and it's such a wide range of ages too, so we don't go too deep into it. But yeah, every week in the back of that particular chapter talks about, you know, for the very first one is how do you tell your kids you're separating, for example, you know. So yes.
Yeah, and on every topic. So when it talks about anxiety or depression or any of that, it'll have that parent page where, you know, you can address it. And then we do have a chapter, one of the chapters does address co-parenting and like how to handle that. Just it's very different for everyone. And so some people are truly like shared. Some people have their parenting situations are on totally opposite sides of the page. And so, you know, working through that in a group, to Stephen's point, like we, there's time to share. And then that's sometimes where we just have to like try to answer questions. And because managing children, their needs through a divorce is just so difficult. And I think the biggest thing that we, since Stephen and I do both have kids as leaders in the group, we really can empathize with those in the group that, you know, have kids and how to talk to them and how to love on them and reassure them that nothing regarding the divorce has to do with them.
Which is, a lot of kids think that, right?
Yeah.
I did something to cause, it's my fault.
Right.
As you guys look back, how did you help your children? Now you're devastated. You're going through a hard time. So, I mean, you know, it's hard to minister it's hard to help someone when you're depleted. How did you work with your kids through the process and interacting with them and assuring them that it wasn't not their fault and giving them the things they needed emotionally when, again, you're pretty depleted yourself?
Yeah. It's hard. I mean, because a lot of cases they do, you know, whether they tell you or whether they're holding it in that they're feeling responsible. But, you know, all you can do is sit them down and tell them this has nothing to do with you. This is what, you know, your mom or your dad and myself, whatever, you know, went through this decision we made. You got to love on them. You know, I was fortunate that my ex and myself, she was local, so we split custody, and so we were able to have the same, you know, basically the same, thoughts as far as discipline goes, as far as schoolwork goes, as far as activities and that kind of stuff. So we never really had any, you know, much conflict in that regard. So I was very fortunate with that, that we were kind of on the same page. But you know, all you can do is just love on them, make sure they know you're proud of them, you love them, and that they had nothing to do with this. But it's a process that, you know, they've got to work through, just like you got to work through. They're working through it too,
right? Because there can be acting out that they have, and you know, when we talked about forgiveness just a couple minutes ago, I think that's part of forgiving yourself, because I made plenty of mistakes during that time, and I think working through even just forgiving yourself, giving yourself grace, whether it's a short temper, whether you I don't, you know, surely they saw me cry in front of them many times, as much as you tried to like keep that in your bedroom or amongst friends or amongst, you know, your parents. So they definitely saw my brokenness through that time. And I think sometimes you just wrestle through, like, did you tell them enough? Did you tell them too much? Did you, like, you question so much that's part of the journey of even forgiving yourself on, like, and even talking with them as now mine are young adults, and talking, you know, through them with, like, I feel like I said this wrong or did this wrong. And to be able to have them even now give me grace and saying, like, Mom, like, no, like, you loved us through so much. And to Stephen's point, we stress that even in divorce care, that kids, like, they need that reassurance.
And it doesn't matter the age they're at either,
yes.
by the way. It's whether they're young or whether they're 30.
Yes.
They need that reassurance as well. That they're struggling too if they're 30 and going through it.
You go through divorce care. You start to feel normal again. People going through grief, and I think I'm feeling like a little normal, you know. I've seen a lot of people when they get to that point, and it's like grief. Sometimes you go through a great stretch, but then it hits again, right?
Oh yeah.
They're ready to jump back in a relationship because I'm lonely. I miss a person around. Talk through how you guys like wanted to make sure that you didn't jump in too soon, that you were healed to the point where you felt it was a good time. Again, I was talking to a guy today and thinking about a new relationship, and he said, you know, I get panicked thinking about that because I don't want to go through that again.
Right.
And how do I know I thought I did it right then. How do I know I'm doing this right? And I not want to live through that. So talk about you saw Heather down the hall, and talk about how you guys work through it. Because I know you work through it at a spiritual level, a biblical level, and an emotional level.
Yeah, I mean, it was years though, honestly. For both of us, I'll let her talk. But I mean, for myself, I mean, it was, you know, when we started dating, it was 6 years, and then really we didn't even, you know, get together for a couple of years even after that. After we first started dating, but I could probably count on one hand how many dates I went on. So it was years for me. I just was not ready. Again, I was focused on my kids, and I knew that, you know, they don't want to see their dad with another girl, another woman. Maybe I was oversensitive. I don't know, but I wasn't ready, and I wanted to do the right thing by them. So, and that's what we talk about in divorce care is, man, take your time, because when you get into another relationship too soon, you know, there's that baggage word, and you hate to use it, but if you're bringing baggage into that relationship, not only are you hurting yourself, now you're hurting somebody else too, and that's not fair to them. So you've really, we caution it. You know, first of all, we tell the people that if you're separated, you're still married. You shouldn't be dating. So right there, you know, so you need to pump the brakes, number one. And number two, you're still healing. You're not ready yet. So, you know, take it slow. I guess everybody, it's going to be different time-wise. I wish, you know, you used to say that, what Marlene or somebody used to tell you for how many years you're married, you should take that many, whatever. I don't know. There was some ratio.
There was some formula.
There's no formula,
I think
though.
The formula I heard, you would never get married again.
Exactly. Yeah.
50 years later.
Yeah. So there is no, and everybody's different, but it's take it slow. I mean, just, you know, pump your brakes on it, and, you know, and even when you get back in there, you know, don't jump head first in.
Yeah, rethink it.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sure you remember, because I think you taught this before, Ron, and of course, working in youth ministry all those years, you know, we would have all those things where we had that mate. You know,
that's right.
What was the M again?
Must-haves,
add-ons, take it or leave it, end of the roads. And, you know, you laugh about it, but when you intentionally take the time to think about it, you know, when you're single after divorce, and take it slow, do that exercise. I mean, why not sit and think about, like, if God is calling you that you'd like to, pursue being in another relationship again, like, why don't you think about that a little bit first before just jumping into it? Marlene, who was the divorce care leader before Val and Stephen and myself, she would meet with me a little bit on the side, and she helped me because she had been through single motherhood and some issues with her kids that I really needed some support. And when Stephen and I first started dating, she would ask me a lot of questions, and she gave me like this printout with like relationship red flags, and she's like, make sure you're reading through this. And a big part of my journey was I wanted to make sure I had a peace in my singleness before I could step into a relationship. And I felt like if I didn't have that peace, then I didn't want to pursue a relationship.
So it's camp there just a little bit, all right?
Yeah.
Talk about that, because I think that's very important.
Yeah.
A peace in your singleness.
I guess you need to be prepared to be single and accept that your whole life almost before you're ready to start a relationship.
Okay.
Because you don't want to start a relationship because you think you got to have a relationship.
Yeah.
The relationship is what's going to heal you.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
And we know that's not true.
So, Heather, were you at that point?
Yes and no, because part of
I swept off her feet.
part of our funny story is that we dated for a few months, and then I kind of ghosted him, is what I think some people say it, where I like didn't respond,
She ghosted me.
and we put a hold on things, and I think it was as a result.
Were you getting nervous? Were you getting scared, or were you saying just I'm not ready for them? I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, that's a good question. I think it was more I wanted to pause because I wanted to self-reflect and make sure I wasn't pursuing a relationship for the wrong reasons. It was almost like I was sensing that I needed to kind of stop and do a pulse check for the nurse in me. And I think, and then it was almost another year even before we started dating again. And I'm not quite sure. I think I really needed to work through some healing on my own that maybe I hadn't fully completed, whether it was just working through the busyness. Like, there's so much going on when you're a single parent and trying to work full time and trying to manage your budget, your kids, the running. And I didn't want to just, like, to his point of bringing someone else into that when you're trying to prioritize being a single parent. I just really wanted to be intentional. So I think that peace in my singleness, there was a lot of factors that would be included in that piece, if you will. And part of what Marlene had given me, I wanted to really go through it. I wanted to look at my must-haves and my add-ons and my take-its and end of the road. And it was really important to me because, as Stephen has shared, he came to Christ as a result of his divorce and attending church later. And I had been a believer since I was 11 years old and had really had my faith rocked in a way that was just very different from his experience. And so taking a relationship on, I wanted to just be intentional about it. So the following year, after I had kind of worked through some of that, when we ran into each other again, it just made that yes to the next first date that much easier at the time, because like I already knew that we got along very well and we had lots in common, and so I think that step of being, and I would recommend that to anyone. Like I say that advice to my young adult kids. Not the ghost part. Yeah, no, I don't recommend the ghost, but the peace and the singleness part. To I even tell my adult kids, like, not work on yourself. That sounds very like self-fulfilling, but like, take the time to know yourself and what are you passionate about before you are pursuing that in someone else.
So you're done with the ghosting. Now you're going to start dating. Where do your kids come in? How do you talk to them, share with them, get their permission or approval, or what do you do?
Yeah, I mean, I can't say I did that as far as permission or approval. My kids. So I'm just trying to think about the time frame here. My kids would have been two of mine would have been in college at this point, and the other one was in high school, and he was playing football with her youngest, who was also in high school. So they kind of saw us together at the football games, probably. We're waiting for them to pick them up after practice. We were chatting in the car. Yeah, at that point, I can't say we looked for. I mean, I don't think you did either. Looked for
not for approval, but open conversation. I mean, that's part of that parenting teenagers at that point. Like you're kind of needing to have an open conversation with them. Like, here's where you're coming and going. Here's where I'm coming and going.
Right. Yeah, and we didn't keep it from them though either. To that, because that's always something you do want to be careful when you're first dating. Is I wouldn't recommend you're introducing the person to your kids until you're pretty committed to them. They don't want to see a revolving door of somebody. In other words,
right.
So
that's a great point.
Yeah,
there.
Not something good to teach them. So we didn't keep it from them. They knew about it. Whether we were with them or without them or whatever. On the weekends or during the week when we saw each other, it was shared with them. Yeah.
So you proposed to Heather at the Mount of Beatitudes in Israel. That was pretty cool. Everybody knew but Heather, I think.
Right.
And we had the videos and everything going there. So you come back, beautiful wedding. Now two homes collide, right? So talk about the blended family dynamic.
First of all, we are not experts on blended families.
No.
But we've certainly lived it. And what you have to understand is, I had been on my own post-divorce for about 9 years. Heather was about 8 years, just about 1 year less than me. And, we had our own systems. We had our own way of doing things. My family, her family had her own way of doing things. Now, of course, you're bringing these together. And like we were talking about this before, like, you can hammer out the big stuff. Like, okay, who's getting what bedroom? Who's going to park in the driveway? Who's going to get the garage? Well, she got the garage. So you can hammer out some of those big things, but it's, what you don't think about are the little things. It's like silly stuff. Like, I buy skim milk. Maybe she buys vitamin D or 2%. It's just little things you don't think about it. One silly one that we were laughing about is, she would always teach her kids when they come in the front door that you kick off your shoes because you don't wear your shoes in the home. You're going to, stain the carpet. I would start walking in the home and I'd see these big pile of shoes in my front door. And I never told my kids that because I don't want shoes in my front door. That's a mess. So
I don't want stains on the carpet.
Yeah. So it's stuff I know it sounds so silly, but it's those little things that you have to just, deal with and overcome. And, you just have to we talked about grace and forgiveness, and you got to give yourself grace and forgiveness.
And the kids,
because
that applies to the kids. Because then I would think like his kids should take their shoes off at the door, and he's thinking, well, you're leaving them all over the floor. And so that difference is a tough one because it's not just our differences; it's even in the parenting differences that starts to come into play. And ours were even older. So I think his point of they were well-established patterns that we had to establish new ones.
Yep. What were the ages when you guys brought your homes together?
So our two youngest would have been a junior in high school and a senior. Mine was a junior. Hers was a senior in high school. And then we had older kids. Most of them were out except my middle one. But she was in college, so she was just home every so often.
Right.
Do you remember the first meal everyone was together?
Oh, I don't know if I do. I do know that his daughter's pink room, we had to totally repaint it to be a boys' room. So she's like, I guess I'm not going to have my room. And that was a decision that was really tough that we had beforehand is, do we buy a different house?
Yep.
And, in retrospect, when you said learning, like, in retrospect, we sometimes still talk about like maybe that would have been better that we got a new house.
Because she moved into my home just to make sure I understand.
And so there were a lot of, I guess just, I don't know if you would use the word barriers or bumps in the road just because of the territory type of feeling. And so that's something to take into consideration when someone's thinking about it. And so, yeah, the ages of the kids, we did have a couple under the same roof for that, the first couple years.
Yep.
Yes.
So let's go back as we wrap this up to those going through. They're in the early stages of just the trauma, the emotion of divorce. Maybe they were completely blindsided. They tried everything. You know, they come to church and they hear, you know, one man, one woman for life, and they think, yeah, right. You know, I thought that too at one time. Talk to that person and encourage them. I know with death, sometimes the church is the hardest place to come to. And I think when you're going through a divorce as well, you come and you know every marriage has issues, but yet everybody's putting on their best face, you know, when they come to church, and it looks picture perfect, and here you are, and you don't have your spouse with you any longer.
It's so hard. It's, you know, we talked about loneliness before. It's, you know, it's you know, when I was going through my divorce, I remember I was bombarded with one other thing. My dad developed pancreatic cancer, right in the throes of it. And you know, as much as my divorce brought me to my knees and knocked me down, seeing my dad from diagnosis to when he died, which was less than 4 months, seeing that disease knock him down like that and take him out, it was really heartbreaking, and it wrecked me. The thing is, my divorce was just as bad, if not worse. And so, you know, I would remind people that are going through it is that, you know, I had so much support when my dad was going through his illness and eventual death. But when I was going through my divorce, I didn't have a lot of that. Divorce carries this stigma that, you know, I didn't have a lot of people calling me and reaching out and offering to take me to dinner like I did with my dad died. People are, you know, maybe they're hands off. They don't want to catch it, you know. And so, you know, if I can say anything to anyone, you know, just there is support out there. There is hope. There's healing. If it's divorce care, that is great. Please come. We've got an open door for you, and we'll help. If it's if it's a pastor, you know, you guys will be there for him as well, and then we encourage that as well. And of course, there's professional counseling too. You know, there's family and friends. We always caution everybody with family and friends a little bit because, frankly, they're skewed. They're going to be on your side, and they might not give you the best advice a lot. Right. So we do caution a little bit with that. They're going to be a support system for you, but maybe as far as the advice goes or not. But I would just, you know, tell people and make sure you reach out because there is you're not the only one going through it. Again, look at the statistics. Yeah. You feel like you are, but you're not, and you know, lean into God because you just said a little bit ago, you know, I'm going to disappoint Heather, and Heather's going to disappoint me, and I'm going to disappoint my kids, and she's going to disappoint her kids, but He will not disappoint us.
Heather talked to the woman who just learned that her husband maybe has been unfaithful, that she's just devastated.
One thing that my senior pastor at my church in Virginia, because he also counseled me something I thought was really wise that he said was, especially at first, and to think of someone who just found this out, he said, keep your circle small. And I know that sounds maybe counterintuitive at first, but he said, you just don't know what God has and what He will work through this. So, like, the trusted people that you do have, whether it be your closest friends, your family, your pastor, like a prayer support person in church, your women's ministry director, like have that circle small. Don't post stuff on Facebook. Don't hit send.
Don't hit send.
Yeah. I mean, guard your heart, especially in the very beginning, to, you know, whether it's journaling, just reading in God's Word, and have that small circle, because, and this didn't happen to me, even though at the time I really had hoped there could be forgiveness and reconciliation. But that's what he said. He's like, you just don't know how God can work healing in a marriage. So if you were to reconcile, do you want 100 people, knowing all, whatever it was? And so I thought that was just really wise advice, especially from a pastor, that I just appreciated it being like practical and scriptural, and like even when you go according to Matthew, is it Matthew 17, where it's like you go one-on-one, and then so I think it follows that kind of just concept of keeping it small. So finding someone trustworthy, I mean, like our contact information is, I think it's out there on the divorce care. And like I know me personally, and I don't know if that's any of your plan, if you, that I'd be happy to talk to someone, very early on, and to see if, divorce care is right from the beginning, or given it some time. But to that young or old woman who is middle-aged woman that has found out something like that, it is devastating. It is heartbreaking. The news that you're processing of you're not enough, you're not attractive anymore. I mean, you can just think of all the emotions that start to just bubble up inside of you, and you feel like ready to explode from sadness or anger, to have that safe place to be able to share it. And so,
hey, to wrap us up, what I'd ask you to do is, Heather, will you pray for women?
Sure.
Going through a challenging time? We want to encourage people to be involved in divorce care and get the help they need, get the healthy help they need along the way. And Stephen, if you'd pray for the guys.
Sure.
That guy who said, nah, I'm going to do this myself. Not every guy's like that, but
No.
a lot of guys are.
Yep.
A lot of them. We're it, right?
You're right. Yep.
So, Heather, if you'll start, and then Stephen, if you close us.
Dear Heavenly Father, we come before you right now, Lord, and we just want to approach your throne, Lord, and just ask you to be with any of those women that are listening right now, Lord, that may be just called upon to have to walk this journey of separation or divorce right now, Lord, and whether it be themselves, Lord, that they are working through it, whether they're supporting someone else, whether they're years later, God, that we know that you are there for us and for them, Lord. I ask you to just pour your presence over them right now, and as you promise to answer our prayers, Lord, that you are with us and that they would know your presence. God, we ask you to pour comfort and healing and resources too, Lord, your providence. God, you are the great provider. And as you have just clearly answered in my life, I know that you offer those promises, Lord, that you are the God who sees, you are the God, the great provider. And I just ask you to walk with those that are currently suffering through this time, Lord, of an unwanted divorce, even if it's something where there's not options and it is a pathway that they need to go, Lord. God, be with these women. Help them find support resources, whether it be their pastor, whether it be a counselor, whether it be through the divorce care ministry, a close friend, a parent. Help them know that they're not alone. Provide some community and support around them. Pour your presence over them. Help them call out to you, even if it's in their anger, their frustration, their disappointments, Lord. Help us and help them to be able to just pour those at the foot of your cross, Lord, and to just rest and draw near to you. In your name I pray.
Dear Lord, thank you so much for just bringing us together here and just giving us this ability to come together and talk about these tough topics of divorce and separation. And I lift the men up out there that are going through that right now. Lord, I pray that you'll meet them where they're at. I pray that they will see that they are not alone and they are not going through, and they don't have to go through this alone. That there are resources out there. Again, whether it's divorce care or professional help. It's just I pray that they will just reach out for that help, and it doesn't make any less of a man to do it. And I pray that they will see that, and they'll get that help that they need. But above all, Lord, I pray that they look to you for help. I pray that they will see that you are the one that will provide. And as I said earlier, fellow man will disappoint, but you will not, and you will be there. And I pray that they see that, and they lean into you, and they grow closer to you, and they just see the path that you have laid out for them, and they take that path. I pray that they will feel your arms wrapped around them and lifting them up and guiding them as they make these decisions. And I pray for wisdom and discernment and just smart decisions that they make along that process as well, Lord. Thank you again for this time. It's in your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Hey, one more thing before we close. People are going to be listening and watching from all over the country, so they can go to divorcecare.com. divorcecare.org, yes. And find a place in their area.
Yeah,
yes.
Hundreds.
Do a zip code search.
Probably thousands of churches at this point. It's a nationwide.
Divorcecare.org.
Yep.
Hey guys, thanks so much for joining us. I really, really appreciate your insight, your time, your ministry, all that you're doing.
Thank you.
Thanks. Well, some of you know exactly what it's like to go through the hell of divorce. And maybe you're still experiencing the deep pain. I want to leave you with two promises of God. Psalm 34:18 says, "The Lord is near the brokenhearted, and he saves the crushed in spirit." And Psalm 147:3 says, God heals the brokenhearted, and he binds up their wounds. So I want you to hear this. God is not only near the brokenhearted, but he heals the broken heart. I want to pray for you. Father, I thank you for those listening, and Lord, I pray specifically for those going through extremely difficult times in their life, the pain of divorce, that reoccurring pain that comes and opens wounds from the past, sometimes when we least expect it, the emotion that comes with that. And I pray, Father, that you would be with each person going through that emotion. I pray that you would be near the brokenhearted, and you would heal their broken hearts. Lord, do your work in the lives of those who need to feel your presence with them today. I pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, I want to thank our podcast team for making this episode possible. Our executive director is Jen Booth. Ryan Jorgen produces each podcast. Mark James delivers each podcast to you, and Laura Crane promotes each podcast through social media. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast on your favorite podcast platform and hit like. We would appreciate you doing that. That simple tap on the screen helps us to deliver our message to more and more people. Thanks so much for joining us for this episode. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform and let us know how we can best encourage you with these podcasts. We'll see you next time.